A jury has ruled in favor of a Penn State football team doctor who filed a lawsuit claiming his decisions about injured students were undermined. That's according to Pennlive reporter John Luciew. He is joining me in the studio. Hey, John, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure.
So you were in this trial start to finish. How did all of this lawsuit get started?
Well, it started when Dr. Scott Lynch, an orthopedic surgeon, was ousted from his team roles with Penn State and Penn State athletics back in 2019.
So this has been going on for some time, and then the jury rules in his favor. He gets $5.25 million in damages. That's a lot of money we're talking about here.
Absolutely. A Dauphin County jury giving that amount of money in an award like this is very, very rare.
So who all took the stand? What surprised you about this case as far as the witnesses and the testimony here?
Well, Dr. Lynch had another team doctor, a former head athletic trainer from Penn State who worked alongside Coach James Franklin, who was the source of the alleged medical interference, and they backed up his story. Now, James Franklin was dropped from the suit over a filing technicality, but he called up two of his star athletes, Trace McSorley and Saquon Barkley, and they put them on the stand to try to vouch for Franklin. But what came out at the trial was Franklin had two demeanors, one for the medical staff, pressuring them to get players back into the lineup and back into the practice and back into games, and another softer demeanor for the injured players.
Okay. So what happens here? Because I think a lot of people were surprised that the doctor ends up winning this case. What happened when it came to those closing arguments with the defense and the prosecution?
Well, Lynch's attorney put in the mind of the jury, why didn't we hear from James Franklin? He was the only one who could have explained what his intentions were when he clashed with the team doctor. He didn't take the stand, and I think he set it up that Lynch's side was being transparent, and the other side was covering something up, namely that James Franklin's hands were all over the removal of Dr. Scott Lynch.
But then you don't hear from him, so he can't defend himself other than those players who testified.
Yes.
Do you think it was a mistake not bringing him up to the stand?
Well, you'd have to ask the defense team that. I tried to. They wouldn't answer my questions in wake of that staggering verdict. But as Lynch's attorney told me after the case, well, if you put Franklin on the stand, then you subject him to cross-examination.
Right.
And this Steve Marino, who was the attorney for Lynch, was very aggressive in his cross-examinations.
Yeah, I bet. He has a lot on the line here, talking about Penn State Health, who, of course, was named in this lawsuit. In fact, they sent a statement to CBS 21. We asked them about this case. They said, quote, "We are extremely disappointed to learn of the jury's decision as we continue to believe that the claims in the complaint have no merit. Penn State Health will soon determine whether it will appeal the decision." Anything that really stood out to you about this trial, John, compared to other trials, or just the pure nature of this one involving a head football coach of Penn State, of course, even though he was, let go from the lawsuit due to the technicality, but not having him on the stand, and then having such high-profile players and names involved in this whole case? Anything that really stood out to you?
Well, the fact that this all became public. I mean, it really exposed the inner workings of the locker room, the Penn State Palace intrigue. It showed that another doctor who was the doctor before Scott Lynch was also fired at the behest of the head coach, that being O'Brien, Coach O'Brien, who took over after Paterno had left.
Yeah.
So it showed that the precedent was set, that the head coach at Penn State calls the shots when it comes to the team doctor.
Right, which of course you're not supposed to do, right? It's supposed to be up to the doctor to decide how the player is as far as their health.
There has to be medical autonomy when it comes to injured student athletes. And Dr. Scott Lynch maintained that that was his interest, protecting the players against interference from the coaching staff, notably Franklin. Now, what was never shown was that any player was forced to play against a medical decision. That's because Scott Lynch said he stood up and clashed with Franklin, and those clashes led to his ouster.
Yeah, so this is a big deal for him, not only coming forward, you said publicly, but then of course a settlement of $5.25 million in this case.
And I think there's no way to read that verdict but a loss for James Franklin.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens moving forward with this. Anything I didn't ask you about this case that you want to add since you were there start to finish?
Hey, I would just say, we covered this gavel to gavel. There's tons of juicy stories on Pennlive, so go check them out.
All right, and we will post this on CBS21.com as well for you to check out. John, appreciate you joining me. John Luciew, a reporter for Pennlive, joining us in the studio today to break down all this information about this trial.